I did the series last year and it went down incredibly well. So you know what? It makes sense to keep this series going and bring it to 2022. 5 early releases. Yes, 5 early releases. 5, despite us only being in like, the 12th day of the year. But your boy grinds. He grinds, he finds the music, and he's here for you. He's here for the people, and he's here to bring you some early releases that have been scheduled via Bandcamp and, all the obscure places that I tend to look for music, and may be going over your head, may not even be, in your wheelhouse, may not even be in your radar or whatever, but I'm here to bring them to you. I did about 4 or 5 of these last year, like episodes. It was like its own mini series. So if this one goes down well as it did last year, then I'll keep it up as well throughout the early months, because it can be pretty quiet, although we have had some pretty big name drops in the past. In the past, like a few days alone, you've got like, The Weeknd coming out. Obviously, we've got Earl coming out soon, FKA Twigs. Like, it's not exactly a quiet time for music, but I know some people get a bit, burned out and just kind of want to take a bit of a break. But just in case you're thinking, you know what, actually, I haven't heard anything from 2022 yet. What's out at the moment? Well, here are 5 for you. Going to start with what I think is the best out of these 5, in my personal opinion. Obviously, it's my own bias coming through here. You might think it's the worst of the 5. But I think Daniel Son and Future Wave dropped a really good hip-hop release that I think hip-hop heads are going to completely overlook this, but I truly think this actually could be a huge favourite for many people who love the old school sounds of rap music. I feel like they remain really traditional in their beats and their flows and, the way that they just put together as a hip-hop album. But in the best kind of way. Like, I feel like they're just so good at nailing the kind of like dirty, gritty sound, but also just bringing some really catchy flows to the table as well. And I feel like tracks like Field Trips, for example, are just actually really good tracks. I know that's not like the most descriptive way to put it, but I'm just really impressed with how little they're talked about, and yet I feel like they come across like they're, in terms of like the way they put together the production and the way they rap, they feel like veterans of the game, and they feel like they're so professional and they're so good at knowing how to create some really great rap bangers that it just surprises me that they're not as well known as they are. So yeah, that's as much as I can say, really. I think the album will speak for itself, and if you are a fan of hip hop, you should be checking it out. Next, I want to mention probably the most unusual name out of the 5 of releases that I'm highlighting here. Effect Walpurgis, with a really cool EP that is absolutely dazzling in how it thunders your face with the acid techno sounds. It's just your typical acid techno rambunctious affair with the tracks that kind of pound you and make you kind of want to go, yeah. And I, again, think this is a release that is worth your time for anyone that likes the sounds of techno music, acid techno particularly, because this is probably not one that you're aware of. So it seemed as though it was perfect to highlight this. Next one, I mentioned Dean Hamilton. I think this is a pretty nice project here. I think what the music selling point is generally with this album is just a really well put together like post rock kind of thing. Not the most inventive in the world, and there are some really like soft passages that could probably wash over you if you're not in the right mood. But I think if you're just kind of in that zone and you just want something to just relax you, this was actually a really nice album. And I was walking by the canal this morning, where I am, there's a canal, and I walk along it on the mornings on my morning treks to work. And it was a pretty, cold day, and this was a nice soundtrack for that. So I feel like, if you're in the right zone, if you're in the right environment, this album could massively hit you, and I think you should be checking it out just for that simple reason, really. And I know there's a lot of post-rock nerds out there. You're all out there, you big dweebs, so this is probably for you as well. Next, I want to mention my boy Soshi Terada. I was thinking even of doing a full review for this man, because I think he is just such a great talent in the world of house music, and he is affiliated with my boy Shinichiro Yokota as well, who I've reviewed on this channel multiple times, puts out really good albums. And it's good to see Soishi is back at it again with a really solid deep house album that doesn't really stray away from your typical deep house sounds. And I would honestly say to both of them, who have both, you know, put out new music recently, I just want them to get a bit more adventurous. I know they've got it in them, and they've put out some fantastic music over the years, and they're so important to the world of house music as well, considering how little they get discussed. Like that's the highest praise I can really throw at them, to be honest. I think these guys are absolute legends and have been at it for many years, but I just think their older work has just been a bit more catchier, a bit melodically driven. And this album here, as solid as it is, I just feel like he can put out better music. So yeah, check this one out, but also just check out the rest of his catalogue too. There you go, man. This isn't even 5 albums anymore. I've just given you multiple ones there. So yeah, Soichi Terada, really good. And finally, wanted to finish off with what I think is the second best album out of these 5. In my personal opinion, it could be your worst, it could be your best. It is entirely your subjective opinion. But I think NaNoWriMo dropped a really cool album at the start of this year as well. And NaNoWriMo's been doing well for themselves. I don't know much about them as an artist, but I've seen some of their other albums get some decent buzz online, particularly in the nerdy music circles. You Rate Your Musics and places like that. Their last album from 2021 seemed to do really well for them. And this new album, I personally think, was even better than the one they dropped last year. So we're making moves, NaNoWriMo. Some typical drum and bass sounds come through on this album here, but a lot of buoyancy pops up too. I really quite like how cartoonish and animated some of these tracks are. Like, I really feel like I'm watching, you know, an old episode of like Sonic the Hedgehog, and they're just like running through super speed, and this is the soundtrack to those moments. Some really cool stuff that attempts some atmospheric moments as well, which I think land, but also parts that remind me of some, like, you know, modern bubblegum bass, maybe even PC music in places. On this album, and even the Danny L. Hall album that came out last year, I got reminded of some aspects of that album coming through. That album did annoy me to shit though, but it doesn't quite get that level of annoying on this album here. So yeah, definitely a bit of a win in that sense, but some really cool music here. And yeah, I guess we'll leave it there. I didn't go into huge vast amounts of detail with all of these albums, but I think, you know, just kind of want to generalize and, you know, give a summary of each one. Hopefully you guys check them out and get something out of them, and definitely comment some of your best early releases as well. Obviously I've done a few reviews for 2022. I've done Vale Smith, My Dream Fever, The Weeknd, so there is some really good music out at the moment, but these are ones that I want to highlight that I'm not, you know, fully loving, and they're not going to be like year-end list favorites, but they are worth your time and they are really good albums. And I think there's got to be at least one here that you would come out of maybe even loving. So let me know your thoughts. Thank you for watching. Tell me your favorite releases so far as well this year. Have a good day. Subscribe if you haven't already, and goodbye.